Hello fellow pet lovers, how in the world are you? Today we're going to talk about ferrets, coronavirus mutation, and just how it's affecting not only the world population, but right here at home, what happens with you and your ferrets in your living room. The news and events coming out of Denmark are alarming. Coronavirus is sweeping through the meat farms. Millions of ferrets are being culled because of the virus and the infection, and now a mutation in the virus on the mink farms that is now documented to be infecting people in the northern part of Denmark and the Jutland provinces. What does that mean for us? What can we do to protect ourselves and our families? What happens if we have a sick family member? What happens if that sick family member happens to be our ferret? We're going to figure that out for you right now. If you're new to this channel, I'm Dr. B. Bruce Bauersfeld, D.V.M, veterinarian in private practice, Southern California. I've helped tens of thousands of pets, just like yours, recover from serious, debilitating illnesses. I invite you to check out my blog. There's links to the videos and website below. This channel is about the best tips, tricks, and training designed to make your pet live a long and happy and pain-free life, and to make you worry-free. So what brings us here today is what's going on in Denmark. What's going on in Denmark, you ask? Well, millions of ferrets are being, millions of mink are being culled because of a coronavirus mutation in the mink. Serious. How much of a threat is coronavirus to you and your family and your pet ferrets? Why am I so worried about ferrets? What makes ferrets so different from dogs and cats? So how did we get here? How did we get to this coronavirus pandemic? Presumably, the virus started in bats and moved to species X, presumably somewhere in the Wuhan markets. People are arguing which species it was, but definitely another mammalian species, and then it infected people, and voila, we had SARS-CoV-2, 2019. A worldwide pandemic ensues. And now in the Netherlands, just this month, people are getting infected by mink. People with coronavirus are giving it to minks on the mink farms. Virus sweeping through mink farms. We've discovered, regrettably, that mink are extremely susceptible to human coronavirus. The mink in the Netherlands, in the northern provinces of Jutland, the health authorities have discovered a mutation in said mink, and that mutation is now described as the cluster 5 mutation. Not bad, not good, so what, you might say? Well, the Netherlands has 33% of their positive cases documented to come back to the mink coronavirus mutation, the cluster 5 mutation. 33% of the cases in northern Denmark are related to the mink farm virus. Worse yet, 50% of their deaths are related to the mink farm virus. Not good. Government's taking actions to curb things, culling 20 million mink plus or minus throughout the country. They estimated the population at 17 million. I've got a feeling it's going to go more than that because there's other mink in the south that in theory are not infected. I'm not so sure about that. But now people have given it to the mink. The mink have mutated the mink. The mink have mutated the infection, and the infection in mink is now being transmitted back to people. So the Danish government has culled nearly 20 million mink this month in the northern province of Jutland over the fears of a mutated coronavirus threatening not only the citizens of Denmark, but the rest of the world. Here we have a cute little mink, and we have a cute little ferret. Ferret mink. Look kind of cute, very much alike. Some of you may have had a pet mink. Many more of you might have had a pet ferret. That's where our concern is today. What makes ferrets so different from dogs and cats, you might ask? Well, first, they're a different family. Dogs are the family Canidae, cats are the family Felidae, ferrets are the family mustelity, which includes mink, weasels, wolverines, martens, I believe. Not too many wolverines in my practice. Perhaps if I were in Michigan, there would be more wolverines. That's not the case here in Southern California. So, why are there so many mink dying and being culled? Because of this virus and what its threat to people. I might mention that the questions all today are from questions that you all have submitted. Sent out emails earlier this week. Clients have been calling in response to the last coronavirus mink outbreak that we published. There'll be links to those videos below. A link to that should be coming across the screen right now. You can click on that to get more information about the Danish disaster that's going on there. But we're going to deal with specifically all of the questions that I've received this week about what's happening and what we can do and how we can protect ourselves. So, why are so many mink dying, I was asked. The two ways that they're dying, one is the virus infection itself. Apparently this virus, in the description of some of the owners and people that work on these mink farms, they described it as kind of starting in one pen and just sweeping across the whole farm. Mink would die very rapidly, and the survivors would be sick for 2 or 3 weeks, strike that, for almost 2 weeks, and then get better. That's good. The problem is when they mutated, they got when they mutated, they got the attention of the government real fast, because no one knows which way this mutation is going to go. Could the mutation be turn out to be an end host in the mink and just die out and not be contagious to people? Doesn't appear to be the case, because 33% of the positive cases in northern Jutland are documented to go back to this mink virus. So it's definitely contagious to people. Second reason that they're dying is that the infection itself is taking them out. So how many have died? Hard to say. The government reports are more interested in the culling process as opposed to the natural death process. In Utah has scores of farms that are affected. The state veterinarian has quarantined a dozen or so more farms, and the Utah state has documented or published, as of last week, approximately 10,000 ferrets that have been culled or died in that state alone. I'm critically interested in what the natural death rate is in this, and I don't think we have any accurate statistics to extrapolate. There's roughly well over 1 million mink, maybe 2 million mink in Utah. So if that's the case, 10,000 out of that number would be in the 5%, plus or minus a lot or a little. A big number, but not 95%, which would be even a bigger concern, I think. Jury's out. This is the pandemic is evolving, and as it evolves, stuff happens and information happens. I've been saying since March that our ferrets are at a risk. Why? We'll come to that very, very shortly. Next question. Can ferrets get coronavirus? Yes. Ferrets can get human coronavirus. The same COVID-19 that's causing the pandemic, they can get. What are the symptoms? Well, the early symptoms would be that of a cold. Sneezing, runny nose, exudate from the nose, discharge, maybe coughing, open mouth breathing. Why open mouth breathing? Rapidly spread to pneumonia and a severe pulmonary disease, and if that progresses, rapid death. The descriptions that I've gotten from the mink farms is that death occurs very rapidly, like within 24 hours plus or minus 12. 24 hours plus or minus 12. And so that's I guess, a data point that we need to be able to take home if we're going to intervene very quickly if any of our pets would, God forbid, get sick. So, what makes ferrets so different from dogs and cats? Why I'm not worried about, particularly with my dog, if I get coronavirus. We'll go into the good recommendations and husbandry practices in a second, and what we should do in all of these circumstances with dogs, cats, and ferrets. But as we said, ferrets are the family Mustelidae, completely different family, completely different group of receptors. What do I mean by receptors? Someone asked me that question. I'm sure that got it to a slide. Think of a receptor as the key hole in a cell that needs to be turned to get inside. So the virus, I used this example the other day. The virus comes along to cell. This is Mr. Cell. It can't get in. Can't get into the cell. This is Mr. Virus. If Mr. Virus can attach to a receptor, and that receptor opens a hole, the receptor is now inside the virus and inside the cell, and the cell it can be very happy in the cell. And one of three outcomes is going to happen when a foreign virus enters the cell. Spits it out, no reaction whatsoever. Foreign virus, not happy. Dead end host. Dead end, not dead host, but a dead end host is what we call it when a virus gets into a species and doesn't do anything and just completely dies out. The virus can be very happy and replicate and make this patient sick, right? The second thing that can happen, or that's the third thing. The third thing that can happen is that the virus starts multiplying inside and gets very, very happy and changes and mutates, and this becomes the new permanent host. And where it came from is kind of not as important. Primary case like that was when COVID started in bats, it was a different thing, and it was not a big deal in those bats. But when it moved into the mammal unknown and then into people, it became very happy and it became a human virus. What's happening now is that the virus is going from people into the bat, into the mink, and now it's even happier in the mink. So, can dogs and cats get coronavirus, I was asked. Back to these receptors, which is making everybody so different. The receptors is an ACE2 receptor. Ferrets have tons of them. People have tons of them. I'm of the opinion right now, just from watching how fast this is spreading, it looks like ferrets have just as many or more than people. We've known that experimentally. Ferrets have been used to study human viruses for ages. The whole aspect of human viral, like influenza, ferrets get influenza really easily. And family members, if you get a cold and the ferret gets a cold, it could easily be your cold. It could easily be influenza and not coronavirus. Keep that in mind as we're trying to isolate our pets and make sure that we don't have any significant problems. So can dogs get coronavirus? Not likely. Very few receptors, smattering of cases have documented. We're going to come up with a chart of that here in a second. Cats, a little bit more susceptible, but not very susceptible. Exotic cats have a different immune system than domestic cats and feral cats. Lions, tigers, ocelots, margays, there was a couple other exotic cats that have been reported sick at the zoos with coronavirus. Apparently, a dead-end host from the standpoint that the virus kind of went through them, they spit it out, got recovered. I'm not aware of any fatalities associated with that in exotic cats or homemade cats. Homemade cats, I like that. As well as dogs. That original dog that was back in Wuhan, back in March, one of the original early reports, Chinese gentleman with COVID had a dog. The dog tested positive. The dog, I believe, recovered from, it was an elderly dog, and I believe it recovered from the coronavirus and then went on to die of other causes. I think that's pretty well documented at this point. So from the standpoint of susceptibility, if we look at this slide, and I don't know which way left and right is. So from, in my opinion, from left to right, no susceptibility. Birds, pigs, chickens have well documented them, no susceptibility. I don't believe horses are a big risk. Other domestic animals haven't been well investigated on an experimental basis. But if you move into the middle, you get exotic cats, which definitely can get it. The golden hamster and all hamsters and the like have ACE2 receptors, and they are a laboratory model and are being used for the research for studying this disease, as well as colonies of ferrets that are been used to study this disease. And then you move in the ferrets themselves and into man. This chart I took from the USDA website. It shows the cases of, I'm not sure I can see this well. So I'm sure you can't see it this well. Let me take a peek at what it, so 7 tigers, these are all positives reported through the USDA and CDC. 3 lions, 35 dogs, 49 cats. Interestingly enough, there are 2 types of tests that are documented here. The first column, PCR, polymerase chain reaction, is an antigen test, which means they were positive and had the infection at the time that was test taken. The antibody test, the center column, documents antibodies that the patient developed to it. And so there were patients that were tested. They didn't have the antibody test. They had the antibody test, but not the antigen test, and they were positive for the antibodies. That simply documents that they got it, and their immune system responded and clobbered it out. If you extrapolate this and try to keep these in perspective, if you've got 1 million cases of coronavirus in people, approximately 1 out of 3 own a dog or a cat. So 300,000 dogs, cats have been exposed to coronavirus in the United States alone, using that statistic. And you're looking at what, if you add all these numbers together, 100 plus or minus with known documented presence of coronavirus in their system. Not a problem clinically. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be taking precautions, but not a problem clinically. So, the virus mutation I was asked about, is it in ferrets? No. So far, the mutation is in northern Denmark. There is no evidence in the scientific community that that virus mutation or genome is anywhere outside of that northern little country, and the government's making every effort to hopefully keep it that way. What precautions should we take if my husband, what precautions should we take if a family member gets corona? Let's say a nice little 5-person family. Mommy, daddy, a couple kids, and a grandma. What happens if one of them gets sick? Well, the CDC, go on the CDC site, check with your doctor, check with everything else, but the protocol is pretty much the same as it's been for the last couple months. Sick person gets isolated. Everybody's using high sanitization technique, MAS, hand washing, disinfection. Not the evil person. The sick person is isolated, treated, gets better. 14 days quarantine, everybody's happy. I don't know the recommendations for if everybody gets tested in the beginning or the end, or just once or twice or 3 times, but the individuals are tested and making sure that they're negative, and we all go on to live happily ever after. What about the dog? What about the cat? What about the ferret? Recommendations from the American Veterinary Medical Association as well as the CDC is to err on the side of caution. The dog should be, and the cat and the ferret should be treated. Nobody has recommendations for ferret right now but me, by the way. But all pets fall in the same group. Treat them like family members, isolate them, don't let them in contact with the sick person, and hopefully live happily ever after. Ferrets, I'm not sure where this comes in the questions. I don't know what's coming up next, actually, but let's talk about what we're going to do exactly with ferrets if there's somebody in the house that's sick. Because they're very susceptible. The dog's not that susceptible. The cat's not that susceptible. If you got a pet ferret, weasel, mink, marten, a wolverine if you're a Michigan alumni, be careful. Put a mask on the ferret or the wolverine. That's a joke, but you can't. The reality is you can't put a mask on the wolverine. No, if my wife has coronavirus, she's got a mask on. I'm taking care of her whatsoever. I got a mask on, kind of like a hospital environment. Fortunately, the medical community is able to stay alive because of personal protection equipment. High use of that. The problem is when you walk into the room where the ferret's at, the ferret doesn't have a mask on. So if the ferret gets sick, he's going to be spewing virus all over the air, and that's a problem. So think about what happens with airflow with your ferret. Most ferrets have a home-based cage. Move the ferret in the home-based cage someplace safe out of the general traffic flow of the family. Make sure that it's not in a room with an air conditioning vent intake. You can have heating coming in. You can have air conditioning ducts come in. Have good air circulation there. Definitely open the window so the airflow goes out and not back under the door, back into the house, but good airflow. If there's an intake, AC intake or heating air intake, move it to a different room. You don't want that air being cycled back through the house. People ask me, should we get rid of our pet ferret? Well, my answer is, in this little 5-member family, if grandma gets sick, are you going to get rid of her? To me, our ferrets and our cats and our dogs are family members. We're going to treat them like family members. We're going to use a high level of protection and caution, and we're going to hopefully live happily after. If the ferret gets sick, call your veterinarian, get on top of things. So the answer to get rid of your pet ferret is no. No, you want to live happily ever after with your little ferret because you got him because you love him. We had a ferret decades ago. His name was Coda. Bounced around the house, did all kinds of fun little things. I used to come home at night and take my ties off and put them in kind of random places. And I have a lot of ties. My wife's blessed me with a lot of ties that I can keep track of. And I would discover in the corner someplace where he had squirreled away, ferreted away, a handful of ties, made him a little pile, didn't chew them up like the dogs would have, just kind of made a little nest of them. It's kind of cute, very cute. Is there a treatment for ferrets? Well, yes, we would treat them like with antibiotics and anti-inflammatories and try to get on top of the pneumonia. The incidence is very, very high when they're exposed, so they're at a high risk if somebody's in the house. Cold, influenza, excuse me, they definitely get human influenza. So I would take the same precautions with them as you would with any other family member. Will a vaccination be required for ferrets? Oh, is there a vaccination for ferrets? What's the treatment for ferrets? Will vaccination be required? I jumped to the middle question and not to the bottom and top ones. But vaccination for ferrets, no, not yet. Will a vaccination be required? Will a vaccination be developed? To be determined. There are companies that are now, I reported on 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. A company that's actually developing a coronavirus vaccine for animals. Where that is in the pipeline, unknown to me right now. It was more of a hyperbole release that I saw than a we're going to go to market in 23 days or something like that. But they're working on that with this huge disaster in the mink farms. I would think the mink industry would be in a position to finance as much as possible a ferret-based vaccine. I can tell you this, that there are more than one company that are developing nasal sprays, primarily to market eventually to the human market. They're using ferrets. They're using ferrets as research models for a nasal spray that doesn't cure the infection, but protects it. Apparently it blocks that receptor type thing that we were talking about, and interferes with the mechanism for when the receptor attaches and opens the door and the thing gets inside, it messes up the opening so the virus can't get inside. And there's at least 2 companies I'm aware of that are working on something like that. And I'm certain there are zillions of companies out there that are working on feverishly to come to market with a product to help us all not either prevent it, assuage it, or treat it really, really, really effectively. Will vaccination be required? Anything's possible when the government's involved. So, and I have no ability to even guess what government rules or regulations would be. It's going to have to be related to exactly how the mutation occurs, what's happening with the virus, what happens downstream, if a vaccine is actually available. As we know, rabies is a prime example that vaccinations are required for dogs, should be required for cats, should be required for ferrets. Ferrets get rabies. Ferrets we vaccinate for rabies all the time. Very, very important in their preventative care package, so to speak. I might notice that, will vaccination be required for ferrets? I'm in California. There's 3 or 4 states, California being numero uno, that ferrets are illegal in. It doesn't mean there aren't scores of people with ferrets. It's estimated there's 800,000 ferrets floating around. I'm certain there are a good chunk of them in Southern California. But the state's not going to require a vaccination for an illegal pet. They're going to, that would be I have no idea what the state would do. We're at the mercy of our government no matter what. So, what would you do, Dr. B? What would you do, Dr. B, if your pet ferret got sick? Well, the first thing I would do is test him, make sure that if there's the coronavirus test is possible. I think there's actually an influenza test that we can use on ferrets, the same one that we use for treat him. I would wear a face mask, protective protection equipment when I was around him. I would put him in a well-ventilated room, window open. These kids aren't going to get cold. These minks swim in ice water and they're happy. So in Southern California, what's our low temperature average? 45, something like that. So the window's going to be open. There's going to be good circulation. He's going to be well hydrated. He'll get fluids, antibiotics, and whatever it takes to get him over it. And hopefully he's in the majority that are going to recover with good and proper care. Interestingly enough, whatever speculation on morbidity and mortality rates that are scattered across the globe, most of these are related to the ferret farms where individual treatment is not part of the husbandry type thing. I've never been on a ferret farm, a mink farm, so I can't comment from personal assessment there, but I've been on large chicken ranches, And the housing on those, I would imagine, would be duplicated in a mink farm type situation. You have multiple pens, multiple areas. The ferrets are housed pretty much, I think, individually or in very, very small groups in cages. But I would think that there would be one group and another group and another group. And for example, in chickens, if you get one flock that's sick, one pen that's sick, you treat them, and you treat all the pens around them proactively. And if you got something that you don't like, the C word becomes in effect. You call that group, and they would call the immediate circle of pens around them to protect the rest of the flocks. One is sacrificed for the good of many. Not how we apply medicine to individuals, but in a herd situation, that's exactly what the general approach is going to be. And as a last question, how worried should I be? How worried should I be? Well, I think the general concerns for coronavirus is still worldwide. Right now, as we're speaking, the states are reporting an upswing. The number of the states are, the government agencies are increasing the shutdowns, now curfews here and the area that we're at, and we have no idea what's going to be next. So continued good personal hygiene, wearing masks, and plan on staying healthy. Can ferrets get coronavirus? Can ferrets infect you? Yes and yes. If any of you, this topic is really critical to me, and if any of you have friends with ferrets and you agree with what I'm saying, if you could leave a comment when this gets published on YouTube, that would be great. So if you agree with what I'm saying, please leave a comment and share these videos with your friends, because I need for them and their pets and their ferrets to get the word out and to benefit from these as well. I appreciate so much your help. Thanks for being with me here today. Well, that's all for today. If you benefited from today's program, please hit the like button below. This channel is about the best tips, tricks, and training available today to keep your pet healthy, give him a long and pain-free life, and make you worry-free. For more information about ferrets, mink, and coronavirus, check out these videos here. And share these videos with your friends so that they and their pets can benefit as well. Until next time, keep your pets healthy. Thanks.